All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 8 Deadly Waste webinar, what you can't see that's killing your business. Now we have a smaller group today for the webinar, so we may have a couple people joining us as we go along, but if not, then welcome to your webinar. So first off, I want to jump into what we're going to cover in today's session. I'm going to do a bit of an overview of the Lean Mean Business Machine webinar series. I've got a couple of webinars every couple of weeks. I got 4 of them scheduled right now. There'll likely be more after that. So I'll just cover those 4 that we have scheduled. Then we'll go over the 3 common symptoms of process problems. How do you know if your business needs lean, and what kind of problems are you dealing with that lean can make a difference with? Then we'll talk about what is Lean Six Sigma, and then get into the main content for today, which is the 8 deadly wastes and some actions you can take to eliminate waste. So before we get into that, I just want to introduce myself a little bit. So my name is Polly Blair, and I'm the founder of Engineering Possibilities. And I'm a chemical engineer. I've got about 16 years of work experience in a variety of industries: chemical processing, manufacturing, healthcare, and then general business process optimization as well. And I created my consulting company, Engineering Possibilities, about 5 years ago now, in 2018, with an intention to make a real difference for organizations with Lean Six Sigma. So I'm trained in Lean. I'm a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, certified change management practitioner, and an executive coach. And when I'm not working, I love downhill skiing. Also a big Formula One racing fan. And I don't know if puppy is the right word anymore, because he's now about 3.5 years old. But his name is Lucas, and he is a Cocker Spaniel. So if he's great to have around. And so just in the chat too, if you would like to put in today just where you're joining us from and what the name of the organization is and kind of what type of company you work with. So feel free to drop that in the chat. And while you do that, we got Houston, awesome, welcome. And then I'll also cover the Lean Mean Business Machine webinar series from Empower Pharmacy. Great. Thanks, Juan. It's great to have you. Oh, Yellow Belt, fantastic. That's awesome. So you might have a little bit of review today, but if you come back for the other sessions, they're going to be more in depth. So as we've got here, these are the Lean Mean Business Machine webinar series, and I'm just going to put in case you have not had a chance to sign up for them all, or somehow only found the webpage for one of them. I'm going to put the link here to check out the other 4, and that's the page that'll update with the other webinars as I create them. So 2 weeks from now, we've got the What Gets Measured Gets Improved webinar. And that conversation, we're going to look at how to invent measurement systems, because a lot of times when you get into a process improvement project, there just aren't measures. So you have to make them up or create them, get a structured system in place, and then make sure they're actually going to measure what you want them to. And then later in February, we've got the data-driven decision making, which is always a powerful tool for organizations to make informed decisions based on real data. So we'll talk about that, Pareto charts, and then different tools that you can use to make decisions. And then the 4th one I put in March is quantifying the impact of lean on your bottom line. And this one can be really important for organizations, particularly ones that are young in their lean journey, not super mature, but exploring and creating. Because a lot of the measurements that typically apply to projects like financial metrics, they do apply to lean, but lean sort of has its own spin on things. So there's a lot of soft savings and productivity savings. And that webinar is about how to quantify your improvements in a way that will keep the accountants happy, as well as actually demonstrate the value that your projects have provided. So those will be great sessions. So I look forward to seeing you all there. So back to today's content, and how to get the most value out of today's conversation is to listen from a real issue in your business. So it should be an existing problem in an existing process. So not a conceptual thing, not something that you're thinking about, but a real problem that you're dealing with. Maybe in production or some kind of business process in your organization. Maybe it's a challenge that came out of the pandemic that you didn't used to have to deal with, or a process really that you're just open to seeing something new about. So something that you know how it works reasonably well and can apply directly what we're going to talk about today, the 8 ways to that process. And now the promise of the Lean Mean Business Machine webinar series is that you'll leave each webinar with new actions that will empower you to elevate the performance of your business that you can put into practice immediately. So I have a couple of downloads that I'm going to share with you all today. Things you can take, worksheets as an ebook, and you can take and use those straight away. So moving now into the 3 common symptoms of process problems. These are things that I find from businesses that consider working with me, or that I end up speaking to and end up becoming clients of mine. We look at what is going on in their business, and there are 3 common problems that people run into. And typically it's a good time to jump into a lean process improvement world. So the first one is the experience of running fast and going nowhere. So this is like being on the hamster wheel in your business, where you're not there running your business, it's actually running you. And you're reacting, you're just trying to keep up, but you're not actually making any real headway. You're just busy. But what exactly are you busy with? It's the question you want to ask. Second symptom, which is similar to the first but distinct in its own way, is firefighting. Now, I like that picture a lot because it's very dramatic. Hopefully no one has ever had a day at work that looks like that, where you've got this massive fire, and although the person's dressed in fire suit, but they don't look like they have any water coming out of their hose. So that's never good. But the firefighting mode is when you're always busy putting out hopefully proverbial fires, but you're just jumping from one problem to the next. It's a very, very reactive mode. So it's not something that you want to get stuck in for very long. And then the kicker is out. Oh, that's a really good one. Putting out fires, but not apprehending the arsonist. Yeah. The problem with that, with firefighting, is that it gets rewarded sometimes in organizations. So if you happen to be the one person who can always solve the problem and put out the fire, and like make everything okay, organizations kind of reward that behavior. And it's okay if it happens once, but typically it happens many, many times. So you're not actually getting to the real source of the problem, like the arsonist, like Juan's talking about in the chat. But you're just jumping from one problem to the next and putting out fires. And that's a very common reactive space to be in. I've spent several years working in that space myself. I used to work at a chemical plant, which is where I learned lean. And there was a lot of firefighting, sometimes with real fires. And finally, the third process problem is looking for answers in all the wrong places. Now, this is similar to the old adage of looking for your keys where the light is instead of where you dropped them. So this is where you have a problem in your process and you jump on it and you fix it. Or there's like a Band-Aid solution and it gets applied and it goes across the whole organization. Now, the problem is that when you get into that space, you're not actually looking for the true root causes. So you're busy trying to find an answer, but consider that you might be looking for the problem where the light is instead of where you actually dropped your keys. So that's another problem that organizations often run into. So if you can hear yourself in any of those situations, it's okay. It's not bad. It's just a common scenario that people get into, particularly in operations. And if you're in one of them, then that's actually good news, because the more value you're going to get out of today's presentation. So with that, just quickly here, because I think everyone is fairly familiar with Lean, but what is Lean and what is Lean Six Sigma? So Lean is a way of optimizing customer value. It's about eliminating waste and streamlining your operations. And then Six Sigma, jumped ahead too far. Six Sigma is more about statistical, data-driven continuous improvements that focus on reducing variation in processes and eliminating defects. So when you put the two of them together, you've got a really powerful methodology that focuses on reducing variation in processes so you can make the same thing the same way every time, and eliminating waste. So you're not wasting your time and energy and resources trying to produce that outcome. So there's a whole world of tools and a kind of a structured way of thinking that improves process performance, efficiency, effectiveness, and it really goes to drive operational efficiency across organizations. And while it did come from the manufacturing world out of World War II and the rise of the Japanese auto industry, and it's got tons of applications in manufacturing all over the world now. There's also a lot of applications in processes that are not related to manufacturing as directly. So you do not have to be making widgets in order to use lean. You can use it in any business. So it doesn't matter if you're a one-person operation or uh, thousands of people in a corporation, you've got some application. So I work with a lot of small entrepreneurs to design effective processes for themselves, working with people 1 to 10 people in an organization, working at streamlining their processes and having them work for them, through to large corporations that would obviously have their own continuous improvement or lean department that would solve all their problems. So there's applications, healthcare. I guys mentioned you were from a pharmacy. That's awesome. That's a great application, mixing compounds and all. Service businesses, chemical processes, even those continuous operation ones, like the chemical plant I worked at was a fertilizer plant. And it ran 24/7, and it was not a batch operation. It ran all the time, and we found lots of applications of lean. Food and beverage is another great opportunity for lean, given the small margins that are small profit margins that are in the food industry, as well as fabrication and assembly. There's a lot of applications there, and I've actually got several projects in that space. So now we're going to move into what's waste and how to deal with it. So the first thing about waste is to identify value in your organization. So value analysis is a way of examining your process through the eyes of your customer so that you can assess which steps add value and which ones do not. Now, value is a really subjective thing. So just because something's valuable to one person does not mean it's valuable to the next person. So when you're in the context of a lean project, you always want to consider value from the point of view of your customer. So there's value-added activities. These are things that change the fit, form, and function of the person or the thing that moves through your process. And the second part of the definition of what's a value-added activity is it's anything the customer is willing to pay for. Pretty much everything else is non-value added. I'm just going to open up the rest here. So there's two parts to the non-value added activities. There's the true non-value added waste. That's the stuff that consumes time and resources and it doesn't satisfy any customer demands. Stuff like rework, fixing mistakes, waiting. But then there's this other category of stuff that does not fit the definition of value added, but you still have to do it. So some people call them non-value added and required activities. I like to call them value enabling activities. So they don't add value directly, but they do make the value added activities possible. So stuff like work permits. You can't work on the equipment and fix it without locking it out and having it be safe. So the process of locking it out and setting up the work permit is a value enabling activity. So for value enabling, you want to minimize the amount of time spent on it, but maximize the effectiveness of that process so that you can move on to the value added step. Non-value added activities, obviously you want to get rid of those as much as you can. Now, the non-value added activities, those are what we call the core process wastes. All the stuff that gets in the way of your business being effective. And the kicker is that business processes, regardless of what application or if it's a transactional process in an office or a true manufacturing process, they typically contain up to 90% waste. So it's really normal to have only 5 to 10% value-added activities in a process. So there's a lot of opportunity here if you look at a process from the point of view of where is the waste. And then getting rid of that, you can really drive up the value and the effectiveness of your process. So with that, we're going to start the conversation about the 8 deadly wastes. So the 8 deadly wastes form this acronym conveniently called downtime. And it stands for defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized talent, transportation, inventory, motion, and excess processing. Now, these things are troublesome, to say the least. So if you take the idea of an iceberg and you've got the small piece of the iceberg that's above the surface of the water, you consider that your value-added activities. Those are the core processing activities, the mixing, the combining ingredients, the actual execution of your process to make the product or provide the service to your customer. Now, the trouble, just like icebergs, it always comes from what you can't see. And if you're not familiar with waste, then you can't see all this stuff that's getting in the way. You just get frustrated and wonder why you can't just deliver what you promised. So the 90% non-value added activities are like the 8 wastes below the surface of the water. So stuff that consumes your time and resources, but it doesn't satisfy your customer demands. In fact, it might even be counter to those customer demands and cause rework to have to fix mistakes. So why is waste so important? Why do we want to focus on it? So let's take the case here that we have a process and say it's 100 minutes long and it's got the typical 90-10 split of non-value added activities and 10% value added activities. Now, let's say that we don't know anything about process waste. And so you come at this project and you're going to figure out how to make something go faster, be better quality, be a stronger product, whatever your objective is. But if you don't know about the process waste, you're only going to see the value-added activities, the processing steps. So you're going to figure out how to run the equipment faster, or you're going to figure out how to increase capacity, and it's going to be a lot of hard work. Now, if you are successful and you are able to make a 50% improvement in your value-added activities, when you actually apply that, you've actually only cut your processing time down by 5%. So now it's 95 minutes long instead of 100 minutes long. So it doesn't actually have the impact that you were looking for. Because you're wondering, why is it still taking so long? I put all this energy and all this effort in to make it go faster. What's wrong? So on the contrary, if you do learn about process waste and you take that same process with the 90-10 split, 100 minutes cycle time, only now you go at the non-value added activities, the waiting, the defects, the rework, the excess processing, the moving stuff around for no reason, whatever you're dealing with, and you actually go make a 50% improvement there, now you're talking. Now you've actually reduced your cycle time down to 55 minutes, cut it by 45%. And your relative percent of your value added activities, when you take this time as the total here, it's actually more like 18-19%. So you've actually increased your overall value for your process and shortened the cycle time significantly. So this is the kind of the world that we want to play in, looking at what are the process wastes and how do we find them. So with that, I wrote an ebook that I want to share with you all. So I'll just put the link in the chat. And this talks about the 8 wastes, a lot of the similar content that we're going to go over in the next several slides. But if you click the link in the chat, it'll just ask you for your email address and you'll be able to download a free copy of the 8 waste ebook. So it's got an overview of the 8 wastes, and it also has some tips on actions you can take to eliminate waste. So for the first one, we've got defects, issues and errors that arise from poor quality process inputs and outputs. So some examples here include manufacturing errors, missing customer information that you have to go back and ask for again, failed product inspections, things you have to go correct and change, and late deliveries, not being able to deliver your product or your service on time to your customer. So this is a problem. The impact of defects waste, obviously there's wasted time, materials, money, and resources. You can have excessive scrap product that you have to throw out or find a way to reuse. And The problem with defects is that you often have to fix them. So that then takes more time and more energy, more manpower to do that rework, and you often have to replace the materials, which increase costs. And as we're going through this, make sure you have that process in mind, thinking about what wastes are present in your process. And you may not find all 8 wastes in your process, but if you find, you'll find a bit of a theme. There'll be 3 or 4 of them that really stand out, and maybe one in particular, depending on your type of process. So overproduction is producing more than what your customer actually needs. So if you have a service business and you have a lot of unfilled client appointments, maybe you've got too much capacity for your client base. Maximum production rates. Just because the equipment can run that fast doesn't mean it should. So you want to make sure that you're matching your production rate to your customer demand. And then preparing extra reports, maybe things that some people don't actually read, but you put the time and energy into creating them. Also, long process setup times. So if you have a long setup time, if it takes you half a shift to get ready to run the equipment, then you might try and just run it really fast to make up for that time, but maybe you're missing the mark. So overproduction, again, this is going to be a theme. Wasted materials, resources, time, and money. Excessive product and work in process inventory if you're running in an overproduction scenario. Unbalanced workloads and bottlenecks, and masking the impact of defects. So if you're making a lot, like if you have 100 units come out of your production line and you have 5 defects, that's 5%. So that's 95 good pieces and 5 bad pieces. On the contrary, if you run at 1,000 units a shift, now you've got that same 5% defect rate. Now you've made 500 bad units that you have to deal with. So just because you have 900 that work, or 950 that worked, sorry, that's 1,000 is 50. Sorry, did that wrong. But if you want to do that, then you're still making more than you need, and it can hide the problem of your defects. Next one's waiting. This is your process downtime and delays. So this is time that you spend waiting to execute the next process step, or waiting for inputs coming into your process. So you might have people waiting, like a lineup, waiting for service. Batch processing and product changeovers can also be problematic. Waiting for materials. There's been a lot of supply chain disruptions with COVID. I know that's happened quite a lot. And waiting for approvals. So waiting impact is increased downtime and decreased productivity. So you're standing around and waiting for something to happen. Delays and process bottlenecks. You could have late deliveries to your customer if it gets significant enough. And it also increases your costs, and it has an inflated process cycle time. While you're waiting for the next step to happen, that cycle time is included. So it's an opportunity for maximizing productivity. N is for non-utilized talent, which is the underutilization of workers' knowledge and skills, stifled creativity, and a lack of opportunities to contribute ideas. So one example of this is having highly skilled workers performing low-skilled tasks, stifled creativity, rejected ideas. So like this one with the girl in the middle there who's just clearly given up on her life and her job. Something's going on that she's just losing motivation. So non-utilized talent impact, you can have higher turnover, lack of motivation. If you're like this poor girl with the light bulb and her idea and this hand that sticks out and just tells her it's wrong, rejected, you can start to lose your motivation for coming up with new ideas. Your productivity can tank and employee morale can go down. And now the other part with that is skilled workers performing low skilled tasks. There's a lot of frustration with that, as well as a non-effective use of resources. I used to work in the hospitals here in Alberta, and we often would do process observations, and we'd find physicians running around like looking for materials, opening drawers in the nurse's station, looking for things they needed, which was not the most effective use of their time. Next, we have transportation. So transportation waste is the unnecessary or excessive movement of products, materials, and equipment. So excessive forklift movements, moving equipment around unnecessarily, having multiple or distant work locations, which sometimes is part of a business. So then you want to figure out how to be efficient with your transportation, and having poor process layouts. So if you have to move materials around from one processing line to the next, and you need a forklift to do that, it's not the most effective use of time. Moving personnel between buildings, I'll hold on to that one. So transportation has to do with the movement of stuff. So equipment, materials, product. What you're talking about there, Juan, is more into the motion waste, which is about the moving of people. So hold on to that thought for a sec. So just back to transportation waste, moving around a lot, excessive costs, equipment wear and tear, like especially for forklifts, waiting for deliveries. And the more you move stuff around, the more opportunities you have to break it, to drop it, to damage it in some way before it gets to your customer. Funny story about this one. I worked with a plastic manufacturing company in Edmonton. And they had a forklift, and they would they made big rolls of plastic rolls for vapor barrier in houses. So they had these giant rolls of plastic that they would produce, and then they'd put it on pallets, and then they'd wrap them up, and then they'd get the forklift, and then they'd drive it around to what they called the back 40, which was outside around the corner into the back corner of the property. And they'd put it down out there, and then they'd come back and get another one. And that product would sit out there until the customer was ready to take it. At which time the forklift would go back out to the back 40, attempt to find the particular pallet, and then come bring it back in and put it on a truck. And they were having a lot of forklift problems, maintenance-wise. They broke down all the time. And when we did a spaghetti diagram to figure out and follow the process of where the forklifts were actually driving, we discovered that the forklifts, over the course of a year, were driving the equivalent distance from Edmonton to Denver, which was something like 2,000 miles, 3,000 kilometers. It is not close. So once they realized the craziness of that, they used that scenario to help justify the building of a new warehouse that was actually attached to the production plant, so they didn't have to go outside anymore. So you want to be careful with how much you're moving stuff around. Next waste is inventory. So the accumulation of materials, work in progress, or products that exceed customer demand, or insufficient materials, work in progress, or products that meet customer demand. So inventory is sort of like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears type of waste. Not too much, not too little, just right. So too much inventory is a problem. That's expensive. It costs a lot of money to hold onto it. You need the space for it. And if you don't have enough material, then you run into frequent out of stock items and not having what you need when you need it, having to expedite shipments, and just gets a mess. So it's about having what you need when you need it, and not too much, not too little. Another problem is accumulated inventory, disorganized spaces. So even if you have the inventory, if you can't find it, that's another problem. So expensive, high inventory levels, it's cost a lot to hold on to that working capital. Product delivery delays, you need a lot of storage space if you've got a high inventory level. And depending on how long you're holding on to stuff, it's got potential for expired products, more opportunities for damage and defects, and things can often even become obsolete while they're in inventory. Next, we have motion. So we've got the excess movement of people in a process and having inefficient workstations. So Juan, when you're talking about people moving in between buildings, this is one of the examples. So searching for tools and materials, performing unnecessary testing and analysis, redundant process steps, changing orientation of parts, and again, moving around from building to building. That's a great example. I probably should put it on here. And again, I like these graphics with people just running out of their minds here. So impact of motion waste, it's inefficient. It's low productivity, low effectiveness, have some inflated cycle times again because you're moving around unnecessarily. And depending on what you're doing, it could put your people at the risk of some repetitive strain injuries. And finally, the last one, excess processing. So this is the redundant activities, processes, and rework that we do to correct mistakes and errors. So using materials that exceed customer requirements. When you make something out of stainless steel and carbon steel could suffice, you gotta ask, why are we doing that? Rework to correct errors and mistakes. So this excess processing often goes along with a high defect rate. So when you have a lot of defects and you got to correct them and fix them, it takes time and money to do that. Having excessive or redundant process steps. So just because there was a problem 15 years ago with this one part of the process, we invented this inspection step, we now have to do it every time. But if you start to ask yourself why, you can get some interesting answers to that question. So excess processing impacts increased cycle time again, so artificially longer than it needs to be. High costs for rework, reprocessing. People get frustrated doing redundant activities and tasks that nobody pays attention to. And obviously it's an inefficient use of time, resource, and materials. So that should give you a quick overview of the 8 wastes and what they look like in practice in a process. So our next slide here, we've got a free download, which I'm going to put in the chat again. Oops, that's the wrong one. Right here. So this worksheet you can print off. It prints nicely 8.5 by 11. And you can use this to go out into the plant or out into where the action happens, whether you have a plant or otherwise. It's got the definition of the 8 wastes. It's got a space for you to write some process observations and then some actions to improve. So I've given this form out to operators on the plant floor and had them bring it back to us at the end of their shift with a lot of improvement ideas on it. We've done some walkarounds doing yellow belt and green belt training with people. So feel free to take this and use it. Print off as many as you like and give them around your organization. But ultimately, it's a tool for identifying the waste, and where you find the waste is typically in where the action is happening, the Gemba, as we say. Now, with all of that, the 8 wastes, it can kind of feel like opening a can of worms. One says you haven't received the ebook yet. Is it working? I'll have to check on that one. If it's not, I'll make sure I email you a copy directly if you haven't got it yet. If not, it should just take a few minutes to come through. So the 8 wastes, you're welcome. The 8 wastes, when you open them up, it can really feel like a can of worms. Like, oh my God, I got these new glasses. Now all of a sudden I just see waste everywhere. And that's okay. It's actually a good sign because now you actually can see it. Now you can do something about it. Before it was just happening and you couldn't necessarily recognize it. So it's okay if suddenly you get overwhelmed at this point. So here we have a bunch of actions to eliminate waste. So it's a little bit busy slide here, so I'm going to explain how it's meant to be used. So reducing and eliminating waste adds value to your business and your customers. So it's a way of saving money, being more efficient, being more effective, ultimately delivering more value to the people who are buying your product and your service. So how this is meant to work is you want to start in the middle. So the process improvement tools. And I'm probably going to have some more webinars on specifically some of these tools. So you can take a look at some of them. One of the best things I love about Lean is that it's all open source. So you can learn and you can find out things about Lean simply by Googling. You can get a lot that's enough to be dangerous with. So if you do these actions in the middle, these are all tools that you can use. And then on the right-hand side and the left-hand side, on either side of the tool, it's got the waste that it impacts. So process mapping basically touches everything. Other things like Kanban systems are more specific to inventory and excess processing. So this is a good reference slide for looking at what waste do I have and which tools should I consider. Some other actions to eliminate waste. So I do offer these lean business assessments where I'll come into organizations and look at what's working, what's not working. A lot of organizations have some lean tools already in place, so it's not like you're starting from nothing. You've got some aspects of a lean program and looking at how well those are working and where they could be enhanced and pieces that might be missing. So I also offer lean consulting and coaching. So I'll come in and run Kaizen events, coach individuals, green belts, yellow belts, other black belts, um, and particularly on the execution of their lean projects, just someone to bounce ideas off of and look at ways you can measure and improve your process. We also work with entrepreneurs and we build out business playbooks, sometimes for larger organizations too, but that's like basically one-stop shop for how to find all the information you need in your organization. I do yellow belts, green belt, black belt training online and in person. And then I also have these Lego simulation workshops, which are fantastic for introducing lean to organizations. It's called Chaos Air. And I have a whole video on my website about that workshop. It's a lot of fun. I have people attempt to build 30 airplanes in 20 minutes. And in the first round, it is total chaos because I've intentionally set up the process to fail. So we like get all the parts, mix them in here and move on back and forth. And they can't find what they need when they need it. They're just screaming for the forklift driver to bring them more parts. People have complicated process instructions that they can't understand. It just doesn't work. So people struggle to make maybe 2 airplanes in the first 20 minutes. And basically they all fail inspection if they do make any. And so then we stop and we teach people some really basic lean fundamentals about how to have a process flow, how to find waste, what to do about it. I'd let them run it again, round 2. And then the third round, we have more of an optimization and let them go for a record. So the fastest time I've ever had people make all 30 planes is 4 minutes and 34 seconds. So that's a lot of fun. I also come on the road and bring it with me. I've taken it to San Francisco and a couple of other locations. So it's a lot of fun to fly around and bring that workshop and really introduce lean in a way that's very memorable to people and makes a big difference. So with that, that's pretty much all the content I had for today. I do want to invite you all to book a free discovery call with me. And I'll make sure that you all get a copy of the 8 Waste ebook. And the discovery call is really just to get familiar with you and your organization, what your challenges are with lean, and add some value to what you're dealing with. So if you've got some questions about lean or you want to take the 8 Waste to another level in your organization, you want to look at some other opportunities, it's a great space to have a conversation. So I have a link for that one as well. I keep opening the wrong thing. I want the Word document that has the links in it here. So I'll paste this in the chat as well. And if you have any questions about lean or the 8 Ways, you can come off mute and ask the way right now as well. So there's the link there to book a call. So if you are scheduled for the other workshops, I'd love to get to know you and your organization, what you're looking at. There's no obligation to do any consulting work with me. I'm just curious for how I can add more value. So they can take a look there, book a time that works for you. And if anyone has any questions, you can come on in here. And Juan, I see you booked one. Awesome. Or is it not working? I can't quite see the picture. It's very small. Oops. It's not working. Okay, let me go get a fresh one. Something's up with my links today. That's an old one that I thought I tested, but apparently did not. Calendar is unavailable. Well, that doesn't work. Let me see if I can fix that quickly. The iCloud servers are unavailable. There could be some kind of outage, which does not work for us this morning. See if we can do it, continue without calendars. Okay, I think this should work. I don't know why it was connected to my iCal account, because I don't use that. So let's look again. See if this comes up here. This should work now. Put that in there. The second link, let me know that that one works. It looks like it works on my end. Sorry about that. It's working. Okay, great one. Thank you. Thanks for making sure that that works for us. Awesome. So I'll let you guys take a minute to book those calls. But otherwise, any questions about the 8 wastes? In your experience, what would be the right way to start implementing this methodologies in a place of business? So you're talking about more like in business processes, like office stuff, or in like a some kind of production environment one? Production. Okay, cool. So production is easier to find waste than it is um, in a transactional process. It's more in your face when you have a production process, and you can see it with your eyes a lot easier. So the first thing I would do is go on a waste walk. So go print off that 8 deadly waste worksheet. Go out and just walk around and look, see what you see. And once you get an idea of where things are at, then you can look at, okay, so what kind of tools and things are needed to put in place. So you might start to research some different lean tools, some standard work activities, some just process mapping. The whole thing can really help. But the other piece of it is that's really where the lean assessment comes in that I do for organizations. So that's a 1 to 3 day, depending on the size of the company. It's an on-site visit, so I come and actually look and see your process myself and look at what's working, what's not working. I do it with you too. So my intention is that it's not just you pulling in my services, that you actually learn how to do this too, because it's actually not that hard. It's a lot of very simple tools. But the lean business assessment really goes an in-depth picture of your current state of your operation. So we'll do a big process map, identify opportunities, look for process waste, maybe do some root cause analysis quickly if that's a fit for what we find. And I have a 12-point assessment that looks at different systems, processes, effectiveness, people's knowledge of lean, and really puts it together into a spider chart where you can see the whole picture of where the opportunities are. And then from there, you get a report that has some recommendations, and then you're free to go implement some of those or work with me to execute. So there's no like wrong way to start. All right, referring more to how to do it when in the play is not on Lean Six Sigma. Okay, so you're asking if you start with management or you start from the operators up. Typically, you'd start with management, but you do want to build it from the ground up at the same time. So lean projects, lean initiatives fail if they don't have good ownership at the top. So you got to have someone who's really sponsoring and believing in the initiative to have it get the attention and not just be a flavor of the month thing, but actually be something that ends up in your bottom line, in your operational objectives for the year. So you do need to start with the top and get those people enrolled in it. And sometimes it does take some of these like grassroots opportunities with the operators to identify some of those opportunities. Make sense? Awesome. Okay, great. Well, I look forward to speaking with you guys one-on-one and learning more about where you're at with Lean and what you want to create. And thanks so much for joining today. It was a kind of a small group today. I only put this webinar out about a week ago, so I don't have quite as many participants today, but there should be lots more for the upcoming sessions. So with that, if there's no other questions, I can let you guys loose for the rest of the time here. We don't have to take the time if we don't need it. So you have any questions, I'll just put my email in the chat as well. If you have any questions, you can feel free to reach out to me anytime. Possibilities.ca. There we go. All right. Well, thanks so much for your participation. See you guys back for February 7th, and have a great afternoon.